welcome to this video. I hope it's going to help you evaluating your composition in future using Chat GPT. Now, what I've done here, I've taken one of my candidates from this year and analysed through Chat GPT. Actually, I did it with many candidates this year for the courses for the appeals. Okay, and I'm going to show you some of the information that I managed to glean, let's say, to get from the information that the examiner gave us. Okay, the scoring, as well as, of course, analyze the candidate's composition as well. Now, this is a very high-level candidate, one that scored very highly in this year's concurso. Okay, and has been working with me specifically on how to pass, of course, and do exams in my exam course. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about the concurso and my impression of it at the end, but let's go and help you, hopefully, to look at using ChatGPT. And I'm going to turn off my ugly face here, and you're going to hear me talking with a PowerPoint presentation on how I did it. Okay? Hope you enjoyed this and that you can do the same too. So let's look at this session. It's on ChatGPT, an analysis of one composition, a very high level composition. At the bottom you can see I've opened up the subtitles. I hope they help for those who have difficulty understanding my English. But what we're going to do is compare the last concurso of Rio Branco composition question, okay, using ChatGPT. Helped me a lot. Previous years we didn't have ChatGPT, so with this year there's a lot we can do, many questions we can ask, and let's have a look at them. Okay, here is a composition sample that we analyzed. Now, this is from a candidate of this year in, let's say, the top 50. I won't say where they are in the current ranking. We still got the third phase to do. This is the second phase, of course, of the concurso, of the examination. And we can see here, lovely written composition. Really no changes, only I think one we can see there. Excellent presentation, paragraphs, fantastic size, the correct size, perfect really, this composition, if you were to see it for the first time. So its impression would be very positive on the examiner. So what did I ask to do, the candidate to do? I asked this candidate to type the information on the composition for me, so I could use it as a text file and put it through ChatGPT. So this only we see here is one part of the whole composition. There's 48 lines of the composition. This is just the first 20 lines you see here, but it demonstrates the high level of writing we see, and of course the overall impression, which is important in the criteria that the examining board requires. Okay, and here was the composition question of IAGES, the exam board, okay, in 2023, composition, okay. So I'll read it very quickly. It says, it gives two compositions, so we expect an analysis of these two, quotations, not compositions, these two quotations. The first one by Marie-Julie, okay, talking about diplomacy as an art of practice, okay, and using it as peaceful means to resolving conflict, while the second quotation by T.B. Miller is talking about gunboat policy, of course, a more, let's say, using hard power as a means to resolve conflicts, okay, rather than diplomacy. So the question, as is underlined in certain parts by this candidate, it says, taking the quotations above into consideration, write a short essay explaining how these antagonistic views can be reconciled in the daily practice of diplomacy. Provide a historic framework for your analysis. Something that we expect in every type of composition. You're answering the quotations and you're giving historical evidence to back up your own views on this subject. So the scoring, here's the general scoring, really falls into two areas. The first one being the organization of the text, which is 25 points, and the second one being the mistakes, basically, 25 points. So those two areas, area 1 and area 2, are what we're always going to focus on in trying to, in a way, argue if the examiner is correct or not when we come to the appeals or the recursos, as we say, section of the whole concurso. Now, the scoring can be quite complicated. Again, I've just focused on these two main areas. The first area, which is the organization, and the second area, which is the number of errors. We see that this CGPL, which is about calculation if mistakes are made, and TL, which is number of lines. In this, it wasn't an issue for this examiner, candidate. And of course, any penalties if the candidate goes over 50 lines, which is the limit. So here are two different scores, okay? The one below is the composition I've just shown you. The one above is one of the highest scores from 2019. The first time IAGIS was chosen as the exam board. Now, one of my students got a very high score with the first part, with the organization. Well, it was a perfect score. Okay, so I always tell my students after that organization how to organize exactly the same way to score. And this candidate here below did exactly the same thing, followed the same rules. Actually, I think this second candidate is better than his score in the his performance than the first score. But here we see that the examiner is being, let's say, more detailed in 0.25 increments for the organization. So we see 1A, 1B, and 1C. In the second score is lower. Well, if I were to read it with my understanding, I would even think that the score in the second score would be perfect as well. Another area, of course, are the mistakes. Now, in previous years, candidates have made mistakes. This year, many candidates of mine who sent me in their results did not make a mistake, and that's a big difference. Now, compositions with no mistakes are quite frequent this year than they were in previously. It's a fantastic performance by many of the candidates, really. Writing under pressure in such a difficult exam with no mistakes is a fantastic thing. And well done to you if you managed to do the same as this candidate here. So in 2019, this score would get 47.5 score out of 50 based on the current criteria of 2023. Well, this one, this current one, which I showed you at the start, gets 46 points. Okay, so there's this slight difference. 1.5 points is an important difference when it comes to getting the top places. Okay, can put you in the top 10 or put you down to over 100. 1.5 difference is quite big. All right, so we see that the criteria has changed, even though the performance of the candidates has changed, as I said, no mistakes. So that's just a quick comparison. Let's use this second 46 points composition to analyze even more. Well, what happened in the last few days, really, of this concurso is the examiner decided to change the model response that he thought the candidate should have. So when before the results come out, the exam board issued this sort of criteria explaining how the examiner should respond. So we can use these two different pieces of information to compare with, as we're going to see now, this candidate's response. Okay, so we've got it in text file, as I said at the start, and I'm going to compare this with these two different criteria, because then we can see this difference. Well, what is the difference really? Why did they make this change first? Well, if we see the different criteria of these two, let's go back. For these two different composition criteria, or let's say model responses, okay, to this discursive essay, we see quite a difference. Okay, when we focus on the evaluation, the first one is focusing on the dual nature, okay, of the peaceful means. Okay, of course, we see, let's say, the diplomacy against the gunboat policy. Okay, and also talks about declaration of war and the invasion of Iraq. In the second one, it's not the case. Okay, we are focusing more on the quotations. Okay, which I think is right, and historical perspective of this question. All right, nothing specific. Okay, at the bottom, we'll see that a bit better. But what it says here, the specificity. Okay, we have to provide a specific historic content, while in the second model question, it's broader in its explanation. Okay, or in the examples we're using. So, of course, the historic references have to be quite specific. In the first criteria, when they changed it, it doesn't have to be particularly specific, okay? It has to have different events, but not as specific as dealing with the invasion of Iraq. And that's what it says here. Also, the citations did not require explicitly to refer to the citations, while in the second one you did. And that was probably a mistake that the examiner made by issuing the model sort of response too early. You have to refer directly to these quotations. Okay, why are they there? And if they're not there and you ignore them, well, it's a waste of a question, really. So the difference between the first one and the second one, I'm sure this will be interesting for many of the candidates this year. Whereas the second sort of new criteria seem to be more holistic and places a great emphasis on the candidate's ability to analyze, contextualize, and interweave the provided quotation into a comprehensive historical perspective. Okay, and that's the overall difference. So now we see this difference. Well, I did the analysis of both of them just to check. So what was the question we used with Chat GPT? Well, I used many questions, but the first question which helped was under critical analysis, how is the examiner's criteria reflected in the candidate's composition? So use this question to put in Chat GPT, use the information from the model response by the examiner, and compared it to the composition that we saw at the start. So this was the first one. And what was the response of this? Well, here was the criteria that I had to focus on. I'm not going to go into this because we've really covered it, okay? but that was the information the examiner's criteria gave Chat GPT, and then Chat GPT gave this analysis based on this dual nature, which wasn't important in the second one, the declaration of war as diplomatic acts, and of course examples in history. Okay, so that was the information. I'm just showing that to show the first analysis. And then the conclusion was the candidate composition does a commendable job in reflecting the examiner's criteria. Okay, it addresses this dual diplomacy, understanding the legitimacy of war as a diplomatic tool, and provides historical examples. In the second paragraph, it says there, while they might be benefit from more direct reference to the Iraq invasion led by the US, as highlighted in the examiner's criteria. And we see that was removed, of course, in the second version. So this only benefited this candidate. Okay, but it does say well-structured and effectively balances historic instances with the legal frameworks and principles. So that's why it's very high-level composition. So when we came to this second one, as I've said, that the information about the Iraq invasion has been removed, basically, and we might want a more broader analysis and not this dual analysis. Okay, so here, there is the examiner's criteria. Now, okay, citing more historic examples and not necessarily, as I keep saying, the invasion of Iraq. Okay, and this is the analysis was given. Now, this is the information that the candidates need to prove why they should question the scoring. Okay, need to cite this information. Okay, these details to say why their score should be improved. Okay, and ChatGPT gives you all of this. All right, so it discusses the author views, the evolution of these different perspectives, and the details of each one. Also, of course, it shows the number of historic examples used by the candidate in his composition. So this three piece information, okay, this analysis is what we need as the evidence to ask the examiner to improve the scoring. Now, which areas do we want to improve? Well, before we do, this is the new conclusion of the candidate. The candidate's composition aligns well with the examiner's criteria. The candidate skillfully integrates the views from the citations, traces the evolution of perspectives of war, diplomacy, and supports the argument with a range of historic examples. The composition is well structured, comprehensive, and depthly tackles the essence of the examiner's expectations. Basically, it's almost perfect. Right? Why he didn't get perfect score, I don't know. Maybe because there are no mistakes. An examiner doesn't want to give a perfect score. So they're focusing now on the organization. And that's why the increments of 0.25, I believe, have come in so they can penalize candidates so they all don't get perfect composition scores. We saw in 2019, there was a perfect score. And now this examiner with this, candidate with an equal or even better performance didn't get a perfect score for basically the organization of the text. So let's go to the scoring of this question. Okay. Well, we saw the scoring of the candidates before. Let's remind ourselves, of course, we've got 1 and 2 areas. The first being the overall organization, and the second one being the mistakes. 25 points for the organization and 25 points for the mistakes. Okay, so, and here was the complicated analysis that we put through ChatGPT to question each area of this scores, 1A, 1B, 1C, and of course, number of errors doesn't have a problem, but it, of course, affects these CGPL score, Okay, so that has to be considered when doing the analysis. Well, putting this through ChatGPT as it is gives us the answer without really much of a problem. So the conclusion it gave after considerable analysis was that the score seems largely reflective of the candidate's performance. However, in terms of seeking feedback or potential review, now 1A and 1B categories, candidate might ask for specific feedback, which the examiner is not going to give, but which led them to get 1.25 points reduction. And of course, 1C, why didn't he get 4 points for that when only got 4.75? And he could have got 4 points because he fulfilled exactly what the examiner required, as we saw in the previous description. So let's look at 1B and 1C and what ChatGPT gave us, okay? And it suggested that the candidate ask for a better score than 8.75. Okay, maybe asking to go up to 9 or 9.25 to improve that score. As I said, we saw the difference between the old and the new score from 2019 to 2023. Now, there is 1.5 difference. So every 0.25 or 0.5 or 1 whole point changes the candidate's score massively and puts them up into a position to fight for qualification for Instituto Rio Branco. Okay, so it says that given the breadth and the depth and breadth of the argument presented, the candidate could query there's a 1.25 point deduction, and I suggested the candidate do that. And then it went to 1C, and it also said it should query why it didn't get the full points. Okay, so by questioning and analyzing, ChatGPT can point us in the right direction to an area which is quite difficult. The overall organization, coherence and analysis and argumentation of a composition can be almost impossible for someone to argue, and ChatGPT can help a lot. Okay, right then. So now go ahead and do the analysis for your composition this year if you got to the phase 2. If you didn't get to phase 2 and you're practicing compositions, okay, use some of this this analysis to help you. Okay, use the scoring, use the question I asked about critical analysis, and you'll get a lot of information back from it. Okay, one area, 1A, of course, the ChatGPT can't help you because, of course, it can't see the text. Okay, and that is a very important thing because what I saw with, okay, this candidate, we saw very, very high score. Why? Because he'd been practicing exams, how to work under pressure. Now, many people sent me their recursos, okay, their espelhos, as we say, for the appeals section, their results. And you could see the ones who hadn't prepared for the exam, who didn't have an exam strategy. It was quite clear. We saw in there, if you go back and see the second slide that I used here, the candidate only made one correction, okay, and that was throughout his whole exam, okay, because he'd prepared, he'd done, I think, 6 tests with me, or 6 tests last year. This year, I think he did 3, but he knew what was happening when and what he would do when he walked into the exam. He knew his timing, he knew what mistakes he was going to make. That's why he got 0 mistakes, and he knew exactly how to organize it. And by having that confidence and knowing that information, then great, the score is fine. Yes, I thought I would use this. All right, just a bit of fun there. So practicing whole exams, what many people don't do, what many concursos actually, let's say companies, don't seem to do that. They're afraid to give their candidates. I've worked with some of them in the past. Not something we do at Clipping or in my own company as well. We do lots and lots of exams, build you up to get you there. Because people were making lots of changes, okay, and corrections, and the examiner penalized people a lot because there weren't many mistakes this year, okay? So he has to penalize those errors of correction, right? So, and that brings, as we saw with the example, that brings you down 0.25, 0.5, and you're out of the running for the top places, okay? So we learned those people who really knew, because there's a couple of candidates who scored very, very high with me. I'm really pleased to see that they didn't make any mistakes as well. So they had prepared using whole tests, okay? My own, of course, site does the just 3 tests, which we do before phase 1 and phase 2 for candidates, and those who did it did very, very well. I'm very happy to see. But anyway, so the main thing this year we found out, many people didn't make a lot of mistakes, okay? But those who weren't prepared lost a lot of points because they made basically a mess and their timing was out. And when they came, especially to the translation, wow, those simple spelling mistakes. Oh, I saw so many in the translation. Okay, I don't do the translation. I have someone who helps me with the translations when it comes to the courses. Okay, and that's where many of the mistakes were, in simple spelling mistakes in the translation. Very disappointing. Okay, but I think it's mainly because the candidates didn't know how to work under pressure and their timing was off, and towards the end of the test they were panicking, so they didn't have time to check. Okay, well, that's it. If you've got any comments or questions, you can ask me below. Okay, this is my first YouTube, so I don't do this very often, so give a like if you like it. Okay, but I'm happy to help and help others. So if you're a teacher doing the Spanish or the French or the history, maybe you can use ChatGPT as well. Okay, that should help you. Or even the Portuguese. Language is not an issue with ChatGPT. Okay, I put Portuguese and English in without really having to do any translation. Boom, and it gave me the results you've just seen. Okay, excellent tool to help us, to point us in the right direction. ChatGPT is not the answer to all of our problems. You have to do a lot of analysis with it, but it gives you the results if you know how to analyze well. Lots of people advising you to do courses on ChatGPT. Knowing how to analyze anything helps you in using ChatGPT more efficiently. Okay, if you don't have the expertise in analyzing, you don't know basically the subject you're supposed to be questioning, then there's no point using ChatGPT. Okay, it's a great tool for those who have that knowledge and can ask specifically those questions to get the answers that you want.